So first of all, let me say good evening to everybody. I hope everybody has signed up for Megillah reading at the Kehillah. I know some of you will be out of town. Thank you for letting me know that you'll be out of town, and we wish you a happy Purim wherever you may be, and a safe Purim. And if you're going to be here in town, we encourage you to come to the Kehillah to hear Megillah in a very safe way. Thanks to the Supreme Court, you could even do it legally. Okay. And what else? There's also
Purim baskets.
Purim baskets. There are Purim baskets. There's a Purim Seuda. You know, there's a compromise position that has been reached in terms of the Purim Seuda. Apparently, I'm the only person at the shul who would like to have fleishiks for breakfast. And so therefore, there is a compromise, and you have a choice of ordering pareve or meat, and it's up to you. So
there's another thing happening, Rabbi, that you're not aware of, as it's hot breaking news, and that is Miriam is going to make children's meals with a little toy in it. That's for a reduced price. So we have vegetarian.
They call it a Happy Meal, an Adar Happy Meal?
An Adar Happy Meal, whatever. Yeah. Jessica's putting it on the website tonight. So
okay.
It'll come out. And it should be yummy, what she's making. So.
I have no doubt.
Okay, Rabbi, I'm going to mute myself, just like everybody else is going to mute themselves now, right?
No, I'm going to mute everybody for themselves. Okay. If you need to unmute, you find a pressing need to say something. See something, say something. You can always unmute yourself. I've allowed you that privilege.
Generally not washable. Hopefully if you dump enough water and soap on the floor.
All right, Chevra, here we go. We begin, at long last, not the actual Amidah, but still the mechanics of the Amidah. Tonight we're going to talk about some of the mechanics and aspects of Amidah that you're familiar with, but you probably don't know what they're sourced in. This is actually, the first part is actually one of my favorite things about Tefilah, a very important Gemara in Brachos. It's just reading something somewhere. It's just reading something somewhere. Now, of course, I can't remember what it was. About how davening should be done in such a way that everybody davens together out loud. And the truth is, I love davening at Sephardic shuls. Why? Because they daven Psuki de Zimra out loud. And somebody says every word out loud. In some Ashkenazi shuls, it's just one big joke. It's like you have to, at best, you can mumble the words, and you're not really saying them out loud. So like you're not even saying the words at all. So it's a problem. It's a challenge. Regardless, though, when it comes to the Amidah, everybody davens the Amidah silently. Now, even though it's silent, prayer must be verbalized. There's a discussion about Shema. Let's take Shema just for instance, because this is a wonderful vort from my father-in-law. I'll start with that. Let's take Shema as an example. The Mishnah says, Hakorei Shema, somebody who reads the Shema, velo hishmiya le'ozno, and he cannot hear himself. Lo hishmiya, he cannot hear le'ozno, to his ear. Eino yatza, Shady knows this one by heart. Eino yatza, he's not yotze. He has not fulfilled the mitzvah. So my father-in-law says, what does this mean? It means somebody who says Shema, but it's just lip service going outward, but he's not paying any attention. He's not listening. He's not observing that which he's saying. Eno yatza. That's not a good Shema. In order to be a Shema, it has to be genuine, authentic. It has to be not just lip service. It has to be a part of who you are, and has to be the way that you act and live your life as well. Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. So Zach wants to know, what if you're deaf? So if actually my students asked me that question when we learned that Mishnah, and I believe that you're still Yotze. You're still Yotze because it just means that if you're Nones, but I believe you're still Yotze. When it comes to Shemona Esrei, however, when it comes to the Amidah, you are not supposed to say it loud enough for the person standing next to you to be able to hear it. You should not, okay, let me just give you some background halacha. You should not go like this Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me. Neither could God. Because I didn't say anything. I just mouthed it. I'm just mouthing the words. I'm not really saying the words. But if you say very quietly, talking softly. So, in talking softly, it is certainly possible to say the words of the Amidah without bothering the person next to you. Again, just by the way, just a little bit of a tangent. I once heard from one of my rebbeim that that person should always daven in the same place in shul. Why? Because that way, the guy who makes noise next to you, you're used to it. But if you're always moving around, that you don't get used to the idiosyncrasies of the people in the shul. And I'm not going to say that in some shuls there are more, we have a stronger concentration of idiosyncrasy than other shuls. I wouldn't say such a thing. Every shul has their own idiosyncrasy, people with their own kind of strange habits and ways of doing things. You have the guy who yawns, the guy who shuckles too much, you have the guy who sneezes really loud. Yeah, you always have these people who would be annoying if you were not used to them. And therefore, it's appropriate to daven in the same place, always next to the same people, so you kind of tune them out. It's hard to tune out somebody who comes like a surprise to you. There was a great commercial at the end of the Super Bowl. I don't know if you saw this. Great commercial tonight, end of the Super Bowl. Shandy was in the room, we were schmoozing, and the sound was off. I don't have a TV, but I was watching on my laptop. And the sound was off. And you see these people doing some sort of weird yoga where the lady was like, guys do this at weddings sometimes. The guy was like leaning over like this, and the lady was on her, they were back to back, and she was in the air. And then he sneezes 3 times, and each time he sneezes, she bounces. And of course, it was an ad for like, an allergy medication or something. It was really funny. Okay. Anyways, speaking of not having any sound and people being strange in your vicinity. When it comes to Shemona Esrei, though, you're supposed to daven quietly. You're not supposed to daven out loud. Where does this come from? We actually talked about this a little bit in one of the original classes. Where does it come from? So on the one hand, you're supposed to verbalize it. On the other hand, it's supposed to be quiet.
Chana?
The answer is Chana. Yes, very good. Chana, the wife of Elkanah, was barren for many, many years. It's the beginning of Sefer. Where is it in Tanakh? Anybody know? Anybody who's been coming to shul between Mincha and Mara better know.
Shmuel.
Thank you very much, Zach. Even though you haven't even though you have not been coming to shul between Mincha and Mara.
Yeah, I think it's chapter 1 too.
Yeah, it's right in the beginning. That's right. Okay. So Shmuel, that's right. So Shmuel is the product of this tefillah, but at the time, Chana, his mother, did not have any children, and so the pasuk says like this. Let me actually share my screen with you here, because why not, right? Here we go. Let's take a look at the pasukim inside. Here we go. Make it nice and big for you. Okay. So, here we go. Shmuel 1, chapter 1, verse 9 through 15. We just read it in English. Chana arose after eating and after drinking, because when they used to go to the Mishkan, so they used to bring carbonot, they would offer sacrifices, and then they also would eat whatever portion of meat was meant for the owners. They would eat. Eli, the priest, was sitting on the chair beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. The chair here, you see the word the? That's an important word. Rashi says either it was the chair of the Kohen Gadol, or it was the chair of the Shofet. He was like the judge of his time. But we know that Chana, she was bitter in spirit, and she prayed to the Lord and she wept. And it was as she davened long before Hashem. Eli watched her mouth. But Chana was speaking in her heart. Only her lips were moving. Her voice was not heard. And apparently, it wasn't typical in those times to necessarily daven in such a way. Eli thought her to be a drunken woman. Can you imagine? She's davening, acting in such a way at the Mishkan, at the tabernacle, at the temple, in such a way that was not typical and was super strange. And therefore, he just assumed she was drunk. And Eli accused her of being drunk. He said to her, "Until when will you be drunk? Throw off your wine from upon yourself." Chana answered and said, "No, my lord, I have not had anything to drink. I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I'm depressed because I've not had any children. Neither new wine nor old wine have I drunk. I poured out my soul before Hashem." Okay, so that's the story. And ultimately, she ends up he gives her a bracha, and she does have a child. She actually has, I believe, 7 children total, I think. Okay, I think so. So the Gemara in Brachos, it's page 31a, as you see here, note number 2, actually teaches some very interesting ideas from the story. Amar Ramanuna says, how many important laws can we learn from these verses of Chana? It says, V'chana hi medaberes aliba. Chana spoke in her heart. That's what the pasuk said. We just read that. It's right in the beginning of Samuel. Mikan lamispalel tzarich sheyichaven libo. You have to have kavana. You have to concentrate your heart. You have to focus your mind. That's how I would translate. Rak. So that's number 1. So medaberes al liba. Okay, so the heart and the heart do like that. You concentrate their heart. Basically, that means they should have kavana. Okay, so that's where that lesson is learned from. The next pasuk says, just her lips moved. Mikan la mispala sheyachtoch b'svasvav. That they must recite the words with their lips. That they have to articulate. They have to articulate using their lips. Okay? The kola lo yishman, her voice is not heard. Mikan she'aser lahagbiya kolo b'tfilaso. From here we learn it's forbidden to raise your voice in prayer. So on the one hand, you have to have kavana. On the other hand, you have to recite the words with your lips. On the other hand, you shouldn't raise your voice in prayer. Now, this is all a reference to what's called the silent Amidah. For what's called the silent Amidah. Now, so the idea of davening Shemona Esrei silently is fascinating because why do I say it's fascinating? We'll read that one in a second. Because there's a change of pace, isn't there? You go from davening out loud, whatever at whatever volume is comfortable for you. I don't know. Actually, I'm curious. Does your rabbi daven out loud? I'm talking to you, Westwood Kehillah people. Who remembers coming to shul? I don't know how loud I daven. You're probably used to me by now. Okay? I don't know. Because when I daven at the kollel, I daven out loud with capital L, capital O, capital U, and capital D. I don't do that so much at the Westwood Kehillah because I think it would confuse people. It throws them off. But I might daven louder than, I don't know. Okay? So, I actually like davening out loud. For me, it helps me kind of get into the davening. It helps me meditate on the words. It helps me connect to the words. It helps me focus my davening. It helps me not be distracted by other things. I find it very helpful to actually daven out loud. We are Americans and we're trained to read. We're trained to read silently. Little children read out loud, and as they advance in their reading, they start to read quietly. True or false? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. When kids, Sari raised her hand. Okay. When little kids learn to read, first they read out loud, and then over time they get quiet. They learn to read silently, and you read much faster silently. And then when you start learning Hebrew, they tell you to actually daven out loud. Of course, people are self-conscious, whatever it might be. Okay. But yet when it comes to the Amidah, no matter how loud the room is, all of a sudden, silence. Just quiet. Why? And the answer, of course, is from Chana. The Gemara learns from Chana that when it comes to the Amidah, the davening should be done in a very quiet way. There are a few questions that have been asked, and one question. How do you get from inaudible to not raising your voice? It's actually interesting. If you can't hear anything, it's probably very difficult to do that. Does that make sense? Is anybody here hard of hearing? If you cannot hear anything, it's very hard to know how loud you're being. Right? I think so. But the reality is, and I use "but" as a negator, that if your hearing is typical, you could go from audible only to yourself to inaudible to yourself on the one hand, and then audible to others. And obviously you have to find that happy medium. Now with social distancing, I find myself davening Shemona Esrei a drop louder because no one can hear me anyways. Actually, many years ago, I did a Shabbaton. Zach, maybe you remember the name of the shul. It's a shul in D.C. It's a historic shul on like Avenue I or something. 5th Street, 5th Avenue.
I'm having trouble being muted and then unmuted. Was it Kesher Israel?
It wasn't Kesher Israel. No. It was in D.C.
Then it was the 6th Street Shul?
Yeah, I think so. And it's a non-denominational shul. I mean,
Right, they have different services at different times.
Right. So I did a kiruv, an outreach retreat there for just a weekend Shabbaton. I was invited to be the rabbi. This goes back many, many years ago. I think Sari Rivki was a baby, so it was only 15, 16 years ago. Okay, and I was the only person davening in the morning. At nighttime we had a big crowd, but in the morning we didn't have a minyan. And I davened Shemona Esrei out loud. And I see that somebody just asked me that question. Can you daven out loud if you're alone? It's a fascinating question. And I always thought, like, why not? I thought the only reason why you don't daven out loud is because you're going to bother the person standing next to you. But I think you see from this Gemara that there's something to davening quietly. I can't tell you exactly what it is. I need to think about it. It's something that's worthwhile thinking about. But I believe that when it comes to the Amidah itself, that you see from this Gemara that it's actually better to daven quietly. Now, it doesn't mean you have to speak. You shouldn't be so quiet that you can't hear yourself, but we do daven quietly. Okay. Rabbi Kerzner, we've quoted from his book a number of times here. Rabbi Kerzner says a couple of things here that I would like to share, and I'll share my screen so you can read it together with me. By the way, if you can access Rabbi Kerzner's tapes online, I believe that they are accessible. You may have to pay for them. And you're looking for some deep, high-level, but really stimulating thoughts about anything, very worthwhile. Okay? So he says that one of the tenets of Jewish prayer, it's not enough to simply think a prayer. And I don't know, by the way, I have no idea what it's like in other religions, okay? So it's not enough to simply think a prayer or to have, or to have a certain feeling in one's heart towards God. Jewish prayer requires that people actually say the words that they think or feel. So why? Why do we have to verbalize prayer? Why can't we feel something in our hearts and communicate it to God through our thoughts? The concept of hirhur, of thinking, being like dibur, like speech, that's a concept that has many halachic ramifications. But it seems that when it comes to prayer, we don't say hirhur kedibur dami. We say that you actually have to speak. It's not enough to just think. Says Rabbi Kerzner that when two people have a relationship with each other, one of the greatest challenges of the relationship is in communicating effectively with each other. In the same vein, it's not enough for us to worship God in our hearts. We must also communicate our thoughts and feelings verbally. Or they cannot enable us to develop a deeper relationship with God. When we say what we feel, it is obviously an analogy that he's using to explain the concept here. It probably goes much deeper than this. When we say what we feel, God becomes more of a reality for us, and we show a deeper level of sincerity about the relationship. No normal person speaks out loud unless someone is listening. So there's actually a couple of points over here. Let's do this like this. So point number one is that it's effective communication is verbal. I'm a wonderful speller, and Andy loves my spelling. Okay, especially when it comes to people's names. That's number one. Number two is when we say what we feel, God becomes more of a reality for us. So it's more real. Number three, it expresses a deeper level of sincerity about the relationship because it's real. No normal person speaks out loud unless someone is listening. Oh, maybe it's a separate point. So it's a deeper level of sincerity because it's a It's real. It's something that's actual. And then number 4, no normal person speaks out loud unless someone is listening. Our verbalization concretizes for us that God really hears what we say. So the concept of Hashem listening is because, in other words, I'm speaking out loud and I know that somebody is listening. But here he says a much deeper point, which is a very interesting and very worthwhile point. Number 4. Once we verbalize our feelings, thank you. Once we verbalize our feelings, they attain a reality that is much stronger for us than had we not committed those feelings to words. When we say something, the power of our words crystallizes our feelings in a way that demands inner clarification. Until something has been committed to words, it can remain a nebulous feeling. Our relationship with God requires that our inner feelings become clear to us and that we use words, thank you so much, to express our feelings to connect with Him. I'm going to give you a moment to read that for yourself. Maybe we can discuss it and tell me what you think it means. Let's take a moment to read what it says on your screen. Feel free to unmute when you would like to share what you think this is talking about.
I think when you hear yourself say something, you want it to be what you actually feel and believe. If it's just in your head, you can kind of waffle. Well, maybe I believe it and maybe I don't. But once you say it, once you say Hashem, creator of the world, or Hashem, Melech Ozeru Moshiach Magen,
Right.
When you say those words, you are thinking, okay, do I really believe that? I think that sometimes. I think, do I really believe this?
Words.
But you want to reconcile what you're saying out loud to what you truly believe and think.
Words are capable of affecting one's mind. To use a bad example, or an unhappy one, in totalitarian states, you often have demonstrations where people recite things together verbally.
Mm-hmm.
Those are a way of affecting the mind of those persons.
Right. For sure.
I was thinking to say is to know. Often when you read something and then you teach it to someone or you say it out loud, it sort of concretizes something. I'm not sure if that's relevant or not.
It's funny, as a rabbi, here it says, when we say something, the power of our words crystallizes our feelings in a way that demand inner clarification. As a rabbi who has to speak all the time, I don't always have a chance to crystallize the idea before I get a chance to share it. Sometimes I'm still thinking out loud. But I think we all do that, just I do it to a group of people. And sometimes people, sometimes you think out loud and you're kind of developing your thought while you're speaking. This is actually quite interesting. Right now I'm teaching a course for Turo called Developmental Psychology. It's actually a very interesting course. And one of the questions that come up is, do babies think? In other words, do you need words to think? I don't know about you, but I generally think using words. So if babies don't have a vocabulary yet, so how do they think? Well, we can't really ask them, can we? But there's obviously a lot of literature about this kind of a question. We're thinking, and we're developing our thoughts, and we're having this, this inner dialogue, these inner conversations, and we're wondering. And then when we actually say the words, and again, if you're saying the words of the actual Amidah, then fine. And if you're adding on to the Amidah, even better, because then it's even more personal, in a sense. Obviously, it's more personal. So super powerful. If you remember what we talked about last week, or if you read what I sent out, on Friday via WhatsApp, the power of slowly, trying to conceptualize some of the concepts while you're reciting the words very, very slowly. It's very, very, very powerful. And it's much more powerful because you're actually saying it than just thinking it. So maybe that's what he means. I think I may have missed a couple of questions here. Myrna, yes, that's what I'm talking about. So Elisheva, I think that's you, right? Elisheva, the main gift of the Jews to daven with our mouths. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm going to take a guess. And that is Pesach. Pesach literally
Yes.
means, okay, good, excellent. Pesach means the mouth that spoke. When the Jews were slaves in Egypt, they didn't have the power of speech. They were slaves, they were downtrodden, they didn't have the free will that they needed to think, to do, to act, to be. As Barry and I have talked many times, it's the freedom to be, as opposed to just like the freedom from. And that's why we say that it's me'am lo'ez, from the people who speak in B'tzeis Yisrael. B'tzeis Yisrael mi'Mitzrayim, Beis Yaakov me'am lo'ez, which Zach loves to sing during Hallel. Me'am lo'ez is the nation of people who speak. It describes our people, and perhaps it's through prayer and obviously through Limud Torah as well. That the speech is the most impactful. Okay, I wanted to show you one more thing over here from this particular page, and that is also on this topic from the Siddur HaRav. Okay, so let's see. It says Smolo Tachas L'Roshi. His left hand is under my head. It says that in Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. This translation is wrong. Zeu ad shmon esrei. This is until the Amidah. And then it goes further. So his right hand embraces me, v'yamino tichabikeni. So that's already the Amidah. So in other words, if the left hand is under my head, that's like the beginning of the hug. But the right hand embracing me, that's already a much closer relationship. So that's the I guess the sequence of verses in Song of Songs and Shir HaShirim, and it describes that which comes before the Amidah to what's actually there at the Amidah. This is analogous to someone who speaks to the king, whispers secrets in his ear. He speaks to him of his very deep secrets. In such a case, he certainly nullifies his own existence and doesn't feel his existence since he has come so close to speak in the ears of the king. This is the meaning of his right hand embraces me. I don't know exactly what he means, although here you have a paragraph to kind of say it, that the sense of proximity to God overshadows our own existence. We're overcome by being in the presence of the Almighty. Silent prayers reflect a special intimacy with God that we enjoy during prayer. I want to take a little bit of a different spin on it. If this works for you, great, but I want to use a little bit of a different spin. I want to be careful on how I say this. When a couple, a husband and a wife, are being emotionally intimate, and obviously physically intimate, are they shouting at each other so they can hear each other? Or are they even talking in a regular voice? Or do they tend to speak in a quieter, more relaxed sort of tone? I don't know. I'm not a voyeur. I'm not privy to people's bedrooms. But something tells me that 99.9% of healthy, normal couples have a very quiet, relaxed way of speaking with each other when it's just the two of them. Now, it could be in their living room even. That's true. It may be in their living room where they're just, companionable. Somebody's texting me that, maybe they don't speak at all. No, that's also obviously a possibility. Sometimes there's companionable silence, of course. I agree 100%. But I think that you're going from talking out loud in the Birchas Kriya Shema to just talking softly. And there's that kind of a transition because you're getting closer and closer to Hashem as you move through the davening, and of course with the Amidah being at the highest place. I haven't seen anybody say what I just said. I made it up just now, but I think that I was inspired by the Siddur Harav. But if you think about it, at least for me, it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense for you as well. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I'm not insulted. So yeah. So Jerry, you want to know about the speed? I wish I had a good answer for you. The real answer, Jerry. The real answer is one you don't want to hear. You know the real answer? The real answer is go to a shul that gives you the time that you need to daven. What happens? I don't want to say lashon hara about 90% of shuls. People are in a rush to get to work, and it's like you lose out. It's almost like you lose out on the ikr. So you lose out on that which is primary and important, which is talking to Hashem, and then you have the mechanics, and you have the minyan, and you have kedusha, and you have all that kind of stuff, but you don't have davening. I understand that. I understand that point of view. I do understand that point of view. COVID-19 was one of the greatest blessings about it, and curses, right? It was a two-edged sword. Was the fact that you got to daven at home and take as much time as you wanted. Somebody said to me, he goes, Rabbi, tell me the truth. How much time does it take you to daven when you're by yourself? I said to him, between 20 and 30 minutes. He says to me, he goes, that's honest.
Rabbi, I remember once davening the repetition of the Amidah.
Yeah.
And it's the fastest I ever done. And Rabbi Israeli, for the first and only time, said Yeshar Koach.
I'm sorry, say that again. I missed it.
So at one time, the fastest I've ever davened the repetition of the Amidah.
Yeah.
At the end, Rabbi Israeli, it was at Mincha, he actually said Yeshar Koach.
Yeah. Yeah. See, the repetition itself is arguable because what exactly is the repetition? We'll get to that eventually. Okay. I mean, of course, in the ideal world, it should be talking to God and it should be representing the tzibur or whatever. It's complicated. Okay. Certainly, our silent Amidah. I want to tell you something. Ever since last Sunday's shir, when I spoke about Rabbi Miller's insight into saying Ki ato shemea tefillas kol peh amcha Yisrael barachamim, to spend a few moments thinking about each word and try to sense Hashem actually listening, it's changed my davening. It's transformed my davening. Not every time that I daven Shemona Esrei, sometimes I'm still distracted, but just being able to concentrate on one sentence alone can be transformative. Imagine you're actually at the level where you're concentrating on the whole davening. Well then, like somebody just texted me, you would daven Shemona Esrei. By the time you're done davening Shemona Esrei, everybody else would be, in their cars. I know somebody like that. Yeah, I see him, on this side of town here, davening the kollel. He davens with a great degree of intensity, and he must daven for an hour every Shemona Esrei.
Rabbi, we have a friend, Herb and I, who recently passed away.
Yeah.
And he was very careful, Rabbi Stillman, so he was very careful about his words. I have no idea how long it took him to daven, but if he made a mistake or he thought he had mispronounced something, he would go back to it to give you an idea of the focus. But, you have to have a balance between, when you're davening alone, that's one thing, but there's a benefit to davening with the seaboard, and so you need to move at a different pace to
there is, right. Look, I agree, there is. David Horwath he used to go to the kollel in the mornings. Why? Because they davened in such a way that he felt that he could daven. And there's very other few shuls that he felt comfortable davening at. And I don't blame him. So it obviously has to be within a range that it's not taking over your life and you're spending 6 hours a day davening Shemona Esrei. I'm not saying that you should do that. But like I keep saying, halacha is to be balanced. So therefore, to be balanced means that you're davening in such a way that you're not going to regret it. It doesn't stress you out. It's just something that really works for you. And so whatever that might mean to you, everyone's unique, but the idea that you should be able to think about davening in front of Hashem and think about the words and talk to Hashem and you're davening, it's a good idea. Yeah, exactly. I believe that. Yeah, certain people they daven to. We have that in our shul. You don't have to bring up Rabbi Schechter. In our shul, we have some people they only get to daven when they have yard site. Otherwise, you'd be there all day. It is what it is. I mean, it's the leading is also when you're a gabbai, Zach. You know that when you have to appoint somebody who's a chazan who understands the sensitivities of the community. If someone who's oblivious to those things, they can't be the chazan. You can try to teach them, and then they could be the chazan, but they can't be the chazan unless they know. If you have a guy who gets up, okay, and he sings everything, and his Kabbalah Shabbos is 2 hours, when normally Kabbalah Shabbos is 45 minutes, well, it's just not fair to their families. So you, as the gabbai, have a responsibility to the tzibur to appoint a chazan that matches. But we're getting a little bit far afield over here. Let's go back to what we're talking about tonight. So the first concept of davening that we talked about tonight is the special intimacy as it's related to davening the Amidah, which is to daven the Amidah silently. The next section that we're going to learn about is facing Jerusalem during prayer. Okay, we actually touched on this a little bit. I even showed you a little video about it, if you recall, from Isha Torah. Pretty interesting video with the notes flying through the air, going up above the temple. So obviously we daven directly to Hashem, and we believe that Hashem hears our prayers wherever we are. Nevertheless, during our davening, we face Yerushalayim, which of course is the site of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Kotel, and it's from there that our prayers, quote unquote, ascend to heaven. Yerushalayim is designated as the gate of heaven from the time of creation, even before the building of the temple. Barry, you want to tell me why or where we know this from in the Chumash? It's a little bit of a challenge, but not an extreme one. I have to unmute you. If you maybe could unmute yourself here. I'm putting you on the spot. You don't have to answer. Where in the Chumash do we see that Yerushalayim is a place that's associated with prayer? And actually it says, Vizeh Shar Hashamayim, and this is the gate of heaven. I'm not sure if you know how to unmute yourself, Barry. So the answer is Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov awoke from his sleep. Barry, give me a thumbs up if that's what you were saying, because we couldn't hear you. Yaakov Avinu, and you got it also? Okay, good, excellent. I just challenged him because he's a Balkore, so that's why I don't feel like I'm putting him on the spot. So Yaakov awoke from his sleep and he said, "Oh, Achein, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Surely Hashem is in this place. V'anochi lo yadati. I didn't know. Vayira vayomar. He became frightened and he said, how awesome is this place. Ein zeh ki im beis Elokim v'zeh shar hashamayim. This is none other than the house of Hashem, and this is the gate of heaven." So, the gate of heaven, the notion that there's a shar hashamayim, the notion that there's an entranceway for our tefillos to go to Hashem. Not to say that Hashem, quote unquote, takes up space or anything like that, but as we've talked about before, in terms of the different spheres and different worlds and spiritual realms, so you may have, nowadays with sci-fi and fantasy, it's so much easier to kind of like wrap your mind around the fact that there's different dimensions, and maybe you can have a gate that goes from one dimension to the next, right? So it's not so hard to understand that anymore. So the Gemara in Brachos, based on the Mishnah, says that if somebody's outside of Israel, he should direct his heart toward Israel. Did Ellie get on video just now? Probably a good thing that he didn't. Okay. Okay. Use your imagination. All right. Eitan Abigail has little boys at home. She knows what I'm talking about. Okay. If someone is outside of Israel, he should direct his heart toward Israel. And it's based on a pasuk. The pasuk says in Melachim, they will pray to you through their land. If he's standing in Israel, he should direct his heart toward Yerushalayim. And that's what it says also in Melachim, Kings 1, chapter 8, verse 44. They'll pray to God via the city that you chose. If he's standing in Yerushalayim, he should direct his heart towards the Beis Hamikdash. the holy temple, as the verse says, they will pray toward this house. That's in Devarim Chronicles 2, chapter 6, verse 32. In this way, all the Jews are directing their hearts to a single place. Okay. Now, I already pointed out one of the most amazing things about davening is that whatever country you're in, whatever time period of history you're in, from the time of Ezra until now, you should be relatively comfortable, although the accent might be so different that you may not have any idea what they're saying. But if you have a siddur and they have a siddur, you should be relatively comfortable to daven from their siddur because there are not that many changes. Now, why does this matter to us? All you have to do is daven to the east, right? Everybody, just out of curiosity, how many of you in your home have some sort of a plaque or a sign or a painting, a something that says Mizrach on it? Everyone has something like that. You go into a home, you have a mezuzah and you have a Mizrach sign. Picture the kotel. You have a picture of the kotel, Andy, in your house? You don't have a picture of the kotel in your house? We'll have to remedy that. All right. You have something like that. And where do you place it? You put it on the east wall, and it reminds you to daven in that direction, to daven to the east. So, Rabbi Yeshayahu Halevi Horowitz, the Shalach, says, and this is actually for those who like to have meditations, meaning, Rabbi, tell me what to do. Give me an idea, something to practice. So here's something for you. When a person gets up to pray, he should turn his face towards the land of Israel as if he were standing in Jerusalem before the Holy of Holies. But he means more than that. He means you should envision yourself standing in the temple. Imagine yourself standing in Yerushalayim talking to Hashem. So you're facing Yerushalayim, but imagine yourself actually being there and then talking to Hashem. So this is the second section I wanted to touch on tonight, which is the direction that you face. Like, does it really matter? See, we read the Mishnah last time we talked about this. We did so not as elaborately as we did tonight, but we read that. I think at that time we read the Mishnah that says that if you're in a place where you cannot face east, you cannot face Yerushalayim. By the way, if you're in Jordan, you're going to face west, right? So, of course you do, Andy. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. What's it called? That obviously if you're in Eretz Yisrael, you're facing Yerushalayim, and if in Yerushalayim, you're facing the Old City. If you're in the Old City, you face the Beis HaMikdash. If you're outside of Eretz Yisrael, if you're in Lebanon, you're going to go south, and if you're in Syria, you go southwest, and if you're going to be in Iraq, you're going to be, etc. Wherever you are, you're going to face Israel. For us, it's facing east. So if you're in a place, let's say you're on a plane davening, leaving New York, going to LA. Well, what direction are you facing? Most of the time, you're facing west. So you just put you just imagine that you put your focus and your concentration to the Mishnah says to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, to the Holy of Holies. Obviously, you can't turn around and do that. And I'm curious what you mean by string theory. Can you summarize it for us quickly, or is that too much?
It's completely esoteric, so I couldn't possibly summarize it. But the idea to me is that there are realms as real as what we experience as reality, but that are completely inaccessible to us. And when I say that, it sounds like, well, of course, that's what, we're davening, and the reality we're davening to is not in the physical world. But the fact that it actually has a corollary in physics, at least mathematically, Nern will know more about this than I do, but it's a mathematical theory anyway. I don't know that it has any other reality to it, but theoretically there are 7 of these other realms, and it helps me that there is some kind of understanding of that beyond our own idea of metaphysical.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we have time for one more part, we'll talk about the the 3 steps forward and 3 steps back. Okay, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. When we begin the Amidah, we step forward to stand before God. When we conclude, we take 3 steps back. And there's a lot of technical ways to do it. Okay, when you step forward to daven Amidah, you use your right foot forward first because you're excited to go, and you're right, assuming you're ready and your stronger foot is right. When you step back, you use your left foot first because your left foot is your weaker foot, expressing a reluctance to step away. Sure, a reluctance to step away from Hashem. Where does this come from, and why do we do this? The Gemara says in Yoma. The Gemara says in Yoma that Omar Rabbi Alexandri. Where do you think he got his name from? Rabbi Alexandri. Well, either he was from Egypt, Alexandria, or his name was Alexander, which was, of course, a Greek name, but the Jews used it. He said the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Hamispalel tzarech sheyafsiya shalosh psios la'achorov. He says someone who prayed must take 3 steps backward, and then take leave of his master. Mordechai said to him, and after he has taken 3 steps backward, he should remain there for a few moments. So what's the idea? Raise your hand, just out of curiosity, if you ever met somebody who demanded respect. So much so that when you were to leave his or her presence, my kids did this with me. No, I'm just kidding. So much so that were you to leave his or her presence, you'd have to leave the room backwards so that you wouldn't have to turn your back on the person. You know what I'm talking about? Well, that's what we do with the Sefer Torah, isn't it? When you put away the Sefer Torah, you don't turn your back on the Aron Kodesh. You step back, you walk backwards. Same thing with Hashem. You step backwards, and you're taking your leave, and obviously you're not going to turn around and show your back to Hashem. The Ramah, sorry, cut some more, please. The Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Moshe Isserles, writes that not only is it true after the Amidah, but before you begin to pray the Amidah as well, you should take 3 steps forward because you're approaching, you're drawing near, you're readying yourself, you're preparing yourself for something that must be done. This is all kind of a technical approach to why, meaning it's like a social approach. But there are some Jewish thinkers that have seen this practice of the 3 steps alluding to biblical events. You want to leave reluctantly, Zach, so you're going to step back with your left foot. It's a sign of reluctance, okay? The Rokeach writes that when we begin the Amidah, the person should take 3 steps forward. Why? Which means take 3 steps back so you can go 3 steps forward. The reason is that when Moshe approached before his prayer, he entered into 3 areas. It's a little bit Kabbalistic. Darkness, Choshech, Anan, Varafel. This is past week's Parsha. Darkness, cloud, and smoky darkness. So it's almost like, since Moshe showed us that there's the steps or the stages of approaching Hashem are 3 different stages, so we mimic that when we approach Hashem as well. Other people say that 3 biblical figures made an approach in prayer. Who were they? Avraham approached. It says Vayigash Avraham. Yehuda approached, and Eliyahu approached. And therefore we also approached 3 times, meaning we take 3 steps forward. And this is this is, at least, obviously, it's probably other reasons and much more here, but just a little bit of a summary in terms of why we take these steps forward and backward. 3 steps, so it's your left foot back, your right foot going beyond, and then your left foot joining your right foot. Okay, that's, by the way, all of this, of course, is in the Art Scroll Siddur in terms of the mechanics of it. Next time we meet, we'll talk about davening with our feet together, bowing, and then we'll start talking about the repetition of the Amidah. Okay? I thank everybody for joining this evening. Always a pleasure to see everybody. And I hope, Bezat Hashem, that I'm glad we met tonight. I hope that my shir was more exciting than the Super Bowl, which was a dud.
That's for sure.
And And I'm very, very happy. I stayed home and took care of Tefilah during the Super Bowl, because if to sacrifice that, definitely not worth it. Anyway, so I wish everybody a wonderful night, a good night. I'm going to try to make the 9 o'clock Mariv at the Kolo. I thank everybody for joining us. I want to mention that in addition to Purim, we also have a major fundraising event happening just after Purim. And if you're not sure, if you don't know much about it, please reach out to me, to Mr. Smith, to Jean Horwat, and we're happy to give you much more information about it. I wish you all a Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Very
Rabbi.
nice, Rabbi. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good to see everyone.
Good to see everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Good Chodesh, everybody.
Rosh Chodesh. Yeah, Chodesh Tov.